April 26th, 2016, Tuesday in the 5th week of Easter.
A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. In those days, some Jews from Antioch and Iconium arrived and won over the crowds. They stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing that he was dead. But when the disciples gathered around him, he got up and entered the city. On the following day, he left with Barnabas for Derbe. After they had proclaimed the good news to that city and made a considerable number of disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch. They strengthened the spirits of the disciples and exhorted them to persevere in the faith, saying, "It is necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." They appointed presbyters for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting commended them to the Lord in whom they had put their faith. Then they traveled through Pisidia and reached Pamphylia. After proclaiming the word at Perga, they went down to Attalia. From there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work they had now accomplished. And when they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them, and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. Then they spent no little time with the disciples. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "Your friends make known, O Lord, the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Let all your works give you thanks, O Lord, and let your faithful ones bless you. Let them discourse of the glory of your kingdom and speak of your might. Your friends make known, O Lord, the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Making known to men your might and the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Your kingdom is a kingdom for all ages, and your dominion endures through all generations. Your friends make known, O Lord, the glorious splendor of your kingdom. May my mouth speak the praise of the Lord, and may all flesh bless his holy name forever and ever. Your friends make known, O Lord, the glorious splendor of your kingdom."
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. You heard me tell you, I am going away and I will come back to you. If you loved me, you would rejoice that I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you this before it happens, so that when it happens you may believe. I will no longer speak much with you, for the ruler of the world is coming. He has no power over me, but the world must know that I love the Father, and that I do just as the Father has commanded me." The Gospel of the Lord.
April 26th, Tuesday of the 5th week of Eastertide. The first reading comes from Acts of the Apostles, chapter 14, verses 19 to 28. We continue to hear about Paul's ministry. And in fact, Paul is almost stoned to death. This is one of the many hardships that he endured in his ministry. He didn't view these things as a trial or as a failure, but rather as signs that he was willing to suffer for the gospel. In fact, in Galatians, he'll call these things his brand mark, his proof that he belongs to Christ. The word that he uses in that letter is stigmata. Today we understand the stigmata as the wounds in the hands, feet, and side, like St. Francis had, like Padre Pio had. But he is talking about the wounds that he suffered from his beatings. Furthermore, he considers them his letter of recommendation. He doesn't need the recommendation of important figures. He on his body carries the seal of the living God. He and the others encourage the disciples. He appoints elders so that they might continue leading the community. And then he goes back and he reports how God has opened a door to the pagans. He shares the good news of the ministry. And that's an important part of any ministry that we do, to share with others what's going on. Not because we want to brag about our successes, but rather we want to speak about the fact that God has worked through us, even though we're unworthy. The Gospel is from John 14, 27 to 31. Jesus bequeaths peace upon his disciples. Peace, shalom, is a peace so profound that it goes beyond a simple absence of violence. It's a peace so profound that the lion will lie down with the lamb, that everything is transformed in God's justice, God's righteousness. That, however, doesn't mean that everything will go fine, because in fact the world will oppose the disciples. The world in the Gospel of John is not the created reality, but rather the world is that part of creation which rejects Jesus, which rejects his love and his message. And so they, led by the prince of the world, will always oppose what the disciples are doing, because they don't want the disciples to continue to remain in Jesus and the Father. But since Jesus is going to the Father, he will continue to shower his love upon the disciples, guide them, protect them. So even though they don't live in total tranquility, they'll live in total peace. Because ultimately, peace and joy are a question of the heart, not a question of external circumstances. I always think of St. Maximilian Kolbe, who's dying in Auschwitz, filled with joy, filled with peace, even though he's in the most hellish place on earth, because his heart is already in heaven. And may God bless us.